good afternoon and happy Wednesday. It's Alyssa Corman, Justin Nielsen here with a look at the stock market today. We're going to break down the action for the major indexes with the Fed causing some moves in the market, Justin, and we're going to look underneath the surface at three individual names, including one in the semiconductor space that's looking pretty interesting.
Yeah, it's not like all tech has soured with the NASDAQ pulling back here, but we'll go ahead and take a look at Coherent, one of the ones that's been on my radar a little bit, but also just kind of to take a check that, some of these rebounds might have some suspicions behind them. So we'll take a look at Pinterest in that regard. And then also a rare ascending base potentially forming in Ameriprise Financial.
Yeah, I like the look of that one. Excited to get your thoughts, Justin. First, let's take a look at the indexes, kicking things off with the NASDAQ here. Then we'll flip on over to the S&P 500. So the NASDAQ closing up about 0.4% for the day. The S&P 500 up about 0.3%. The Dow up 0.6%. So leading here today, Justin. They're also 2,000 up about 0.4% as well. So a really nice upside move here right around this 50-day line as the Fed announced a pretty big announcement about rates.
Well, it kind of, saved the day here a little bit, because when you were looking at the action of yesterday, yesterday had all the makings of a stalling day except for the volume. And then you had you expect weakness after that, and we definitely got that weakness today. I mean, we were down over 1% on the NASDAQ at the lows, but then, as you mentioned, the Fed came in, and I think the big surprise there was that 2024 is where they're looking at the first rate hike, and if that's the case, that gives I think a lot of investors some room to breathe a little bit, not thinking that rates are going to necessarily go up that high. And that has been one of the things that's been concerning. If you go ahead and type in 0TNX, just so people kind of understand that the Treasury, this is the 10-year Treasury that's coming up. And, this is one of the things that's kind of gotten investors, a little bit nervous. And it looks like that's not going to come up for you, huh?
It's thinking. It's just,
oh, there we go.
Really
there we go.
taking some time to think
so
there.
there we go. I
Yeah.
mean, and again, keep in mind you have to divide all of this. It's this is very very small movements, but you can see that overall, I mean, what interest rates have done in the last few months, this is what's kind of spooked investors. And so for people that haven't been investing for very long, that just started in 2020, hey, this is the highest interest rates you've seen on the 10-year Treasury. This is the yield that we're looking at here for the 10-year note. So the fact is that this has been a concern. I think the Fed kind of put some of those concerns to rest, but it was still going into new high ground for the Treasury yield in recent action. So I always, first thing I do after the Fed, any Fed announcement, I always go to Jed Graham. He's usually the one that's covering that for us at investors.com. And, that's where I kind of look to, and, to kind of get some sense of what happened. But also, as the hour approaches when the Fed meeting is happening, I'm looking at the intraday chart, kind of looking at the reaction, and you can see on S&P 500 here, SPY, this is when the Fed announcement. I mean, let's play a game, see if anyone can guess where the Fed announcement happened, or the Fed meeting. So
yeah, no annotations really needed here, but
right.
yeah.
So when you see that kind of movement, before I even knew what happened, I knew that there was something that investors liked in terms of what they were hearing, and that did lead to a good rebound in all the indexes. As you mentioned, the NASDAQ composite was up, 0.4%. S&P 500 back to new high ground. Dow Jones Industrial average back to new high ground. Those have been the leading indexes. So that's where we've been gravitating towards with a lot of the stocks we've been looking at lately.
Yeah, that's right, which we'll get to here in a quick second. But I do want to get your thoughts very quickly, Justin, about the Dow and the prospect of it being extended at this point.
Well, that's one of the things that, this was a lot of days up in a row, right? And so you would expect some sideways action, but, you kind of, if you bought one of the indexes or something like that, and let's say you just bought DIA, which is the ETF that you're showing right now, the Spider Dow Jones, tracks the Dow Jones Industrial Average. If you bought that, depending on how you're playing it, you've got cushion now, so you can give it some room. If you were doing this as a swing trade, well, yeah, you'd want to be selling into that strength, potentially looking at, some weakness coming in and then maybe buying some back. But at this point, it's not doing anything wrong, right? Now, there is some, I think, cause for concern that a lot of these trades have started getting extended. A lot of the things that were out of favor, some of the reopening trades, the travel, we were talking about jets and Spirit Airlines and some of these things. Yeah, they're starting to get extended, and so if that starts reflecting in the indexes, you would expect some
Mhm.
sideways action. And you know, also just looking at the NASDAQ, going back to the NASDAQ, it's not like the NASDAQ composite, which is usually the leading index, it's not like that one's out of the woods. For as much as I
Mhm.
like the action getting back above the 50-day moving average line, David Ryan on our IBD Live show made a very good point. If you draw a line kind of straight across from 13,600 on the NASDAQ composite
Mhm.
there, that's a level where it keeps on getting hit and turned away. You just draw the line right there. So yes, we are back above the 50-day moving average line. Great. But is this going to be able to cross that line? Because it keeps on hitting that line. Hit it yesterday, got turned away. It hit it a few weeks ago, got turned away. Will it be able to cross that line and stay above it?
Very great perspective there and a good technical level to watch there for the NASDAQ. All right, well, let's take a look at Coherent, ticker COHR, gaining about 3.3% today, Justin. Semiconductor equipment maker, group 24 out of 197, pretty impressive. Some interesting gap ups here for this stock as well. And tell us what you like about this chart.
Well, and this just goes to show that even though the NASDAQ composite still looks a little iffy, it still could be in a correction here. There are these pockets of strength still in tech, and one of those has been in some of the chip makers, the chip equipment. This is a manufacturer of lasers, and there has still been some strength here. And I also wanted to just point out, if you look at the weekly chart here, look at how it came back. It came down. And that was a pretty dramatic pullback, but it really, you had that sharp weekly move up, and it really was just pulling back into the that big strength. So it was just kind of taking a break from that big move on strength. Can you just look at how much that was up that week?
Yeah,
If you
let's
just
do
yeah,
it.
do the track price. um,
34%.
I mean, that's a lot. You would expect to have some pullback after that. And the fact that it retained the bulk of those gains and then started moving forward again, that's a lot of strength. And if you go back to the daily, this is something that held above the 21-day moving average line. So it's
Nice
almost like
reversal there
this has
too.
said, yeah, that's the green line right there. It's almost like this said, what correction? Sure, the Nasdaq's off 12%, but this is just something that has really held up well. And so whenever I'm in a situation where I'm looking at a correction in the indexes, I'm always curious as to what's holding up the best. And you see this relative strength line, it's strong. If you compared this to the NASDAQ composite, that thing would be through the roof.
Right.
So again, it's not that everything in the NASDAQ has been broken. There are still these pockets of strength. And so that's what I'm interested in looking at.
And so in terms of what happened today, would that this move over 250 considered an actionable opportunity?
I think as a swing trade, you could make the argument. It's certainly, you got to be careful when things start getting extended in the indexes. You've got to be careful with your breakouts sometimes. And this is too short to be a traditional position trade breakout, right? It's too short of a base there. What it is a strong week and a little bit of a pullback, but you're getting back to those new highs. So as a swing trade, I would have preferred it probably as it was breaking the downtrend, after it had
Mhm.
that reversal and kind of got back above that level. That would give you a little bit of cushion here, and then you could have participated in this gap up. But it's still worth watching. Where does it go from here? It certainly looks interesting. I wouldn't mind,
Mhm.
putting a little bit of a trade on there. We skipped it on Swing Trader because it was kind of a little bit borderline in terms of whether it had the liquidity for us.
Mhm. All right. Well, we'll keep an eye on Coherent. And next on our list, let's take a look at Pinterest pins, the stock of the day, but not because it's breaking out or actionable from a buying perspective, But today's action shows that this might be an opportunity for investors who have been trading this one. If you didn't get out in that nasty sell-off, now might be the good time to do so.
Yeah, and you know what? One of the points that I want to bring up here is, okay, if you kind of remember what coherent looked like, COHR, that kind of had a little bit of symmetry to it. It came down for a few days, and then it was coming up about the same amount in a few days. Now look at Pinterest here by contrast. When it broke below 80, this kind of came down to 60 very quickly in 3 days, and now how many days has it taken for it to get back up? Well, it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6,
At
7,
least
8.
twice as many or more, yeah.
Yeah, and it's still not there. It's still not back above 80. And now we're getting to the 50-day moving average line. This is a place where it could potentially hit resistance. So look, if it continues up here and you're still holding it, maybe you can get some more gains. But if you see a reversal here and you're still holding it, that might be another chance for you to sell. And that does happen sometimes where you'll get a stock. It definitely made, if you go to the weekly chart on this real quick, it definitely triggered one of our sell signals. It broke below that 10-week moving average line in a very big way on very heavy volume. But right now, the rebound, it just, the volume has been a little bit weaker. The rebound has been a little bit weaker compared to the strength. I mean, the strength of the down move, very high volume, very big down move. And so far, the rebound has been weaker. And that, that weak rebound rally is something that you have to be careful of. And if you haven't sold, you can sell into that strength, and it could be a good chance to lock in profits if you still have them.
That's right. And that's not to say that the story with Pinterest
Not at
isn't
all.
great. The numbers aren't
My wife
great.
loves Pinterest.
Yeah.
In fact,
It's
I'm not
had
going
a
to show her
huge
this
move.
video. How could you dare talk against Pinterest? She loves it. She gets
Exactly.
so many ideas from that in terms of things she wants to do with the house. But again, we're just looking at the chart sometimes,
Yeah.
and that can project a little bit further out into the future of what the market and what the investors are seeing.
Exactly. Other areas working much better. So a great breakdown there on why it might be time to just move that capital elsewhere. And we detail all of this and more in our Stock of the Day article over at investors.com. So
Yeah,
definitely
David
check
wrote
that
that one
out.
today, so it was really good. And it's not even about putting your money elsewhere. Sometimes it's about keeping it on the sidelines and just avoiding that risk.
Yeah. Such a good point, Justin. All right, let's take a look at ticker AMP, Ameriprise Financial. Setting up here, I'm going to go to the daily chart after this, but look at the tight action that we've seen over the last couple of weeks. And on the daily chart, we're seeing a rare base form here, Justin, the ascending base.
Yeah, so the ascending base is something that Bill O'Neill originally, discovered kind of in one of his mistakes. And one of the things we talked about on IBD Live today was make sure you go over your mistakes. And it was Redmond Industries that he had. He sold this, watched it go up, hundreds of percent without him. And that's when he started doing this research on the ascending base and came up with another number of examples that looked very similar to this. The one thing that I'll say that looks a little bit different to me is usually the ascending base does have some deeper pullbacks. These are about 7-8% on each of these pullbacks, but you get these three pullbacks, and it does still qualify as you're looking at the daily chart. And that also corresponds to these pullbacks of the 50-day line where it was getting support. So you have to be careful sometimes because, again, multiple pullbacks of the 50-day line, you don't necessarily want to be trying the later ones, but this is something that has kind of this ascending base look. So typically you would look at 234.01, 10 cents on top of that high as a breakout area. You could maybe sneak in a little bit earlier, as it kind of crosses that area that you're drawing right there. So that's something that looks like it's setting up. And again, it's not like this is alone. There are other members in the finance group that have been looking very strong and showing strength. And while the relative strength and the earnings on this are not spectacular, there is something that is compelling looking about the chart.
That, yeah, is some interesting technical strength. And we've seen, like you said, a number of financial names in the spotlight as money's been rotating out of tech. So
Yes.
an interesting place to look for ideas. All right, Justin, thank you very much for that. And thank you all for tuning in. Just a reminder that Leaderboard Free Access Week continues.
That's
And if
right.
you missed the webinar from Justin and David, make sure you check that out in our webinar archive section on investors.com. In the main navigation under the videos tab, you will find webinars and you can check it out right there. But I'm sure it was a fantastic webinar explaining everything you need to know about Leaderboard.